thing going?
Yep.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to the May 29th, 2022 meeting of the CFF TOC. I've got a few agenda items, standing ones of reviewing actions from last week and outstanding PRs. And then Marcela is here to give us an update on the services management working group, and we'll address any other business. In terms of reviewing actions from last week, I think we just had one that we recorded. I was on the hook to start an RFC about more clearly defined process for adding or removing a repository from the scope of a working group, which I did not have a chance to do, unfortunately, but I will try to get to that for next week. Is there anything else that anyone had in mind that we needed to do? All right, well, in that case, we can move on to outstanding PRs. As we covered last week, a bunch of the outstanding ones are about repository ownership things. So I figured it's not too productive to discuss those here since we want to nail down the process for that. We've had a few others come in the past week. The first of those is, actually, I think it is one of those, it's just adding CF test helpers to the org automation.
Yeah, I commented on it because I think the CF test helpers should also be added to the working group charter to have that at least sort of in sync.
Yeah, and I think this is something that is maybe even a good case study for things that we want to make sure we're covering in that process RFC about adding repositories, because I think once we pull in the RFCs about the team structure, then we'll have to coordinate.
The difficult thing is maybe if no, something needs to be changed there and access rights are missing, then of course I don't want to block here any work. And then if that's the case, yeah, of course we can merge it.
Right.
Actually, I guess like we are currently with a big YAML that represents the whole CF organization. And on the other hand, we are in the process of YAMLifying the working group charters in terms of members. Maybe we should actually put those two things together, right? And derive the access rights from those if they are machine readable.
That's a goal, but it's not yet there.
Yeah, I think we even talked about that last time. Yeah. Where it was like, okay, we've got a better source of truth for the membership in those teams, as well as what the team should be. We should just be able to derive that from that smaller set of specifications, and then merge it into the main YAML or have it synced separately or something. And then the only other one that is outstanding that came in the past week is this one about adding a member to the FI working group. I guess Ruben's not here to discuss this, but it looked like maybe right now they just have a single approvers team, and this would be adding this person to that. And it sounds like this is in support of the UAA CLI. Oh, go ahead, Stephan.
Exactly. I gave a +1 because I know this guy is working on the UAA, and if he doesn't have the rights, because all this working group setup is not yet there, then it's again this theme unblock work, and then come to a better solution over time. So I would be fine with that.
Yeah.
Does that mean we should approve it without Ruben? I mean, Ruben's involved, right?
I don't know if it's urgent or not. So it's just.
Oh, it's from Ruben, so presumably he has approved. So, yeah.
Sounds like maybe okay. I'll throw an approval on there. Although you already threw an approval on there, Stephan. So like that might be enough, right? Well, I won't merge it. I'll slack it.
No idea if it is enough. I just approved it.
Yeah,
but it's like the working group lead asks for a member to be added. Sure.
Yeah. Exactly. So Ruben can merge it from my point of view. I won't merge it as well because
yeah. I'll go ahead.
Okay, I'll tell Ruben. I'll slack him and tell him he can merge it. Send him the link.
Is actually like formally formally that is a change to the working group charter or something like that, right?
I think it's just adding the person. Oh,
Or
yeah.
is it in the permission list? Because I don't even think that this needs TOC approval. That's like the working group can add approvers, of course. Like,
yeah.
Like, I mean, maybe it needs a process so there's not a single person just single-handedly deciding these things because the lead permissions allow it, but the TOC involvement is something like that I don't really see.
It's
It's
only
like,
for
that's
projects,
perfectly
right?
fine.
Not for person.
Well, yeah, at some point we would expect this person also to show up in the list of approvers in that YAML for the working group charter. So,
it is that's okay. So I checked that.
Yeah.
He's an approver in the UAA area.
Oh,
okay. These areas are not reflected currently in the Cloud
Oh,
Foundry
I
YAML. So this is all fine from that point of view.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So if that's already covered, this is just backfilling the membership in the GitHub org. Okay. Even better. Great. All right. So I think moving on to old PRs, I think the only one that's outstanding is the one about the stale bot, which I know, Jan, you and I have both had concerns about. I think we said actually last week that Ruben was going to take another pass at this. I hadn't checked to see if he had done anything yet.
Need to look at that as well.
Okay, I don't see any changes since then, so I guess this is still pending adjustments. All right, well, I think that's it in terms of outstanding PRs that aren't just repo lifecycle management. So the other main topic we have is the update from services management. Marcela, do you want to take it away? Tell us how things are going.
Sure. So I first wanted to introduce the group to everyone. Services management is comprised of the cloud service broker. That is basically all approvers and contributors. Most contributors are from VMware, based in London. Service Fabrik is mostly driven by SAP in India. The OSBAPI API, which has its own board, but we will talk about that later on in challenges. At this moment, I'm joining those calls, and then there's someone from Salesforce as well, but that's most of the involvement we have. And volume services, there are projects with not much activity these days, and it's also mostly driven by VMware in London. What we have been doing so far, we set up a regular cadence of meetings. We have a bi-weekly meeting set up that satisfies India and London times. And we are now moving to also repurposing the OSB API call that was every other week as well, that it happens in the East Coast morning, London afternoon, to have more time zone friendliness towards that area. So it would be every week. And we have a Slack channel that you all have been invited to. We have done a couple of working agreements. We piggybacked on Amelia's great work, and we have a way of people suggesting ways of working in our group, and a process for reviewing PRs, and we have been reviewing PRs and issues, right? We have been reviewing and assigning PRs and issues in the bi-weekly calls, well, weekly now actually, calls and making progress. And most of the repositories we manage, there's not a great activity of contributions. It's mostly internal, but we do have a big backlog of all things that we discuss about just ditching all of them with a bot and starting all over, but nobody was 100% comfortable. So we are little by little looking at them, and we have made very great progress. It's not that bad now. We have, these projects are scattered all over because we have some in the Cloud Foundry organization. We still have some, the Service Fabrik projects in Cloud Foundry Incubator, and waiting on the team to have a bit of bandwidth to actually move them over, because there are some integrations that would probably fail. We have that experience with the Cloud Service Broker. And OSBAPI API have their own organization in GitHub, so they are not in Cloud Foundry. So we have actually 3 GitHub projects to track all of this, because we have projects beta doesn't allow to import issues and PRs. That at least not yet. I know Ruben raised an issue with them, and hopefully we'll have that to ease the process later on. Most contributions happen via PRs, but we are not yet enforcing the PR-only workflow. And there's the feeling in the teams that will make daily work more difficult. So we are always discussing about just trying it out and then surfacing the challenges with it. But we are not there yet. What's the next things that we wanted to do is start assigning reviewers automatically, but because we are still going through all issues that we don't know who has the context to, we haven't done that yet. Time zone challenges hopefully will get fixed a little bit with having alternating meetings. So one in the London morning, the Europe's morning, one in Europe's afternoon. Although the problem is that not the whole group can meet at any all at the same time, unfortunately. And we haven't had any specific requests from the community about having roadmaps or more visibility for cloud service brokers, though there are people who are looking into our internal tracker, which is public. It's internal, but we know it's people who are welcome to look at it. And there are some questions in the Slack about the progress. So we are probably one of the next things to do is at least publish a very high level roadmap with the big blocks of things that we are working on in all these projects. Challenges for all the teams is all small teams that are siloed in a company and overwhelmed with company deadlines. So trying to at least progress little by little and seeing what we can do that aligns with the roadmaps, the internal roadmaps as well, to satisfy the community. PR-only workflow and Stillbot I already mentioned. There's also, I remember one of the another group mentioning this, I think it was Giuseppe, about having products built from the ground up. That's one of the challenges we have with cloud service brokers, for example, which was built from the ground up. Well, actually the R&D in VMware got this legacy, but not a legacy, this prototype of a product and was lacking testing. So we are still at the stages of figuring out all the testing that we need to have in place to actually accept PRs with more confidence, although we are opening it up more now and suggesting people to submit PRs and trying to review them and merge them actually, and improving our testing to make this possible. So hopefully in the next few months it will be get better.
Are you using GitHub Actions for that stuff? Are you trying to leverage GitHub Actions for it?
We are using GitHub Actions for a new layer of integration test that we have, but that's just a little bit portion of the system.
Sure.
So then the big acceptance test that we have actually run in Concourse, in the VMware's Concourse, and
sure.
They create infrastructure in ISS and all that.
Right. I mean, you could do all of that in GitHub Actions. I think for teams that are trying to maximize their ability, you know this. Okay. Anyway, PRs, GitHub Actions is a win there.
Yeah, I think that more than GitHub Actions, the problem is that all the tests that we have actually create infrastructure in our ISSO.
Right, it's expensive and long running. And we have to decide, are we willing to pay that bill on PRs or not? And then finally, like, we need a best practices guide at the TOC level for GitHub Actions, because like that thing's a security nightmare from my perspective. Like, it's so easy to leak the secrets without realizing it. Like, it can be used correctly, and it's so cool, but also like, you really have to know what you're doing in terms of like, there's like 3 checkboxes and a bunch of settings, and then they all matter from unless you're running like unit tests or something where you don't have secrets. Like, if there's no secrets to protect, then like your problem becomes a lot easier. Are there no unit tests, Marcela, that you can run automatically?
So there are some unit tests for the core broker itself. But the whole project is a core broker and then broker packs, which are actually Terraform modules that you use to provision and bind to the different instances. And
right. Okay.
so there are some unit tests for the core broker. It's not ideal. They are not ideal, but we are growing that suite as well. For the broker packs themselves, there's no unit tests. We are implementing now some tests that actually at least test that the values that you're sending are the right ones. So we are generating. We think we are generating what we want, but we don't get to even see what Terraform we are actually applying. So
fair.
We still have a long way there to go.
Cool. Thanks for reminding me how that all works.
And then finally, for challenges, I think the most challenging one, or at least for me, is the OSB API, because there's not much being done on the Cloud Foundry side to support newest changes in the OSB API. And actually the OSB API board used to have many people from VMware as well, and they have all migrated to other companies or other projects and got further away from the services space, so they are not contributing anymore, or not even being part of the meetings anymore.
I can fix that if you want, as in like, we have people building Kubernetes-based service stuff who might also care what happens to OSBAPI at the same time, right? So like, I think we could get you another person for that leadership group, that, you know, but their interest would just be making sure that it like is going in a direction where that overlaps with our Kubernetes-based stuff. I mean, the problem with OSBAPI is that the K8s community has walked away from it as a service broker technology, which is disappointing. It means that now there's several different things out there for service brokering going forward, right? And so Heroku is the main player, right? Are they still wanting? Does it work for them basically, or are they trying to augment the spec with new things?
So Salesforce actually is, because they own Heroku, right? They are using this for internal developing their own apps, right? Not for the Heroku platform. Heroku has their own thing that is close enough to the OSB API. They still want this, and they want it to grow in to support K8s as well. They have a number of ideas that I was willing to flesh out and see if anyone is interested in that as well. So bringing in someone from the Kubernetes world as well might be interesting, because that's where I see it moving forward. But still is I think the conflict that I see is that if the cloud controller doesn't implement any of this in Cloud Foundry, then what's the use of it being in the Cloud Foundry Foundation? I don't.
Yeah, I mean, there's another way to look at that is we might not need anything as a community more out of OSBAPI. Like it might be good enough for what we need.
Mm-hmm.
And so then if it's not good enough for what Salesforce needs, we don't have a lot of incentive to make ourselves compliant unless we're doing integration between the two, right? Unless we have cloud controller clients needing to speak to whatever Salesforce is writing that implements the OSBAPI side, which doesn't seem likely either. So there's divergence in the spec if we continue to go down that path.
I think there's one incentive. If I remember correctly, CAPI is not yet using the latest OSBAPI spec, and the current OSBAPI spec would support credential rotation for service instances, and this is really a feature that would be valuable. But I have to admit, we also did not engage ourselves in updating or started a discussion because there are so many other issues in CAPI that needed first. But this is definitely something I would like to see on the roadmap for the cloud controller to consume this latest existing spec and support these credential rotation features.
Yeah, credential rotation, anyway, it's not even in the latest version. It's yet to be released in a version of the API. So we don't have people in the board to actually vote on it to be released.
What I'm curious here is, like, does it really need a spec? Apparently it does, because that's why it was made. Why does it need a spec change? I would just imagine create a second binding, take the credentials from that binding, delete the old binding.
The reality is more complex. The reality is more complex.
Okay.
Doesn't work for rolling updates, and
why wouldn't that work for rolling updates? Anyway,
there's often a uniqueness constraint. You can't create more than one. They don't expect. There's like a primary key issue where, like, yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, it might work. It might work, or it might reject the second binding until the first binding is deleted, and you can't do it without downtime unless you modify the spec, blah, 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 blah. Okay. I don't know how common this is actually in practice. I guess in practice, people do want to do it with no downtime, right? So you cannot solve this problem because you try to create a second binding and then delete the first one. And it's like, you can't create a second binding until you delete the first one. And then you delete the first one and the app is like, uh-oh, I am down now.
So in reality, this is one of the showstoppers for rolling updates, actually. So many people use then blue-green deployment, and via this blue-green deployment, you can indirectly also rotate or then create new bindings and have this credential rotation. That's what I've seen quite a lot, and that's a pity, actually.
Right. You're saying, so you have a second copy of the app, you can solve this problem.
Yep.
Which is true. Cool. That's very interesting. Yeah, I was like, oh, just recreate the binding, but I do minimize the downtime impact in my mind when that happens. Oftentimes you can actually delete a binding without disconnecting the existing app too. Like, the really sneaky solution is you recreate the binding and then you roll and restart the app. And like, MySQL doesn't disconnect you, for example, when you delete a user.
Are you saying just hang on to those TCP connections for dear life?
Go really fast. Go really fast, and it's all fine.
Brokers that fiddling around with security groups and disallows requests. So there are funny things here and there. So this is one of the unsolved problems yet for many applications, what I have heard.
Marcela, since we're on this topic, do you know if this requires server-side changes to do? Presumably it does, because it's a change in the spec. It's not just a change in the way that the OSBAPI clients behave in the spec. Like, you'd actually have to do something, right, in each of these brokers to support credential rotation. Is that true?
Yeah. That my
Right.
understanding is yes. I haven't
Yeah.
looked deeply
Yeah.
into it, but I assumed it.
Right, so you don't realize any value if none of the brokers do it either. So it's like, oh
Mhm.
gosh, it sounds like an expensive long play to get that credential rotation over time.
I'd say it's a pity that the initial work and initial spec didn't mandate that double bindings are supported, right? Because that would have been so easy.
Hard to
Anyway.
remember who did that work, and let's not look it up.
Yeah. Still, it's easy to say all the things that were missing at the beginning, the one that you have everything done, right? Yeah, so that's about it from my side. I don't know if you all have any questions. That's not providing rotations.
I think
No
that
question.
sounds like a wrap. Yeah.
Okay.
Marcela, if we want to look at those roadmaps, would we just look in the list of projects? Or you
I'm not
mentioned
in
projects,
place yet.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned having separate projects just to be doing issue management in the three different GitHub
Mhm.
orgs, right? Okay.
Yeah, I was planning to do projects as well, different projects for roadmaps, but haven't got around to it. That's like next things to do.
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much for the update. Please keep us posted if there are other things you think we can help you with.
Great. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks, Marcela.
All right. Well, I think we can move on to other business. Ram, I think you might have added one about a PR plan for the soon-to-be named Korifi project.
Yes, Eric. So I basically wanted to do an exercise with, I guess, all of the TOC, and Chris kind of overlooked that he wasn't going to be here this week. But there are some areas about the entire PR exercise that we are planning for Korifi that would really benefit from some inputs from this group of people. So I thought I'd share the PR plan with folks. This is sort of all of the questions that we're expected to answer. But then again, some of these are probably out of scope for the group. But if folks have any strong opinions and inputs, and you can just toss them into the respective sort of fields there, answers are really appreciated. So that's really what I had, but I guess it would really benefit if Lee and Chris were put here as well. Sorry to repeat myself, but I just thought I'd share the document and see if we can get some answers, or cough up any talking points.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for raising this. I think if we've got access to that, we can take a look over the next week, and then we can talk about it again next week.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. Great. Well, are there any other topics we would like to discuss before we adjourn?
The build packs outage earlier this week is probably worth discussing. I think that could have been a bigger impact than it was. We got lucky maybe in a couple of ways that maybe aren't going to happen all the time in the future. And I've been looking into this on the VMware side to figure out what didn't get transferred to whom when and what should have happened. And I guess my proposal is that that I'm going to ask Chris when he returns to create a home for these CloudFront distributions and SSL certificates. Like I want to move everything DNS related over to the Linux Foundation. And that includes SSL certificates, obviously, because there's that tie-in, right? Where you can't really get SSL certs, which also means you have to move the terminator for the SSL certificate. But if it's CloudFront, then you know, it's just another proxy, it's another intermediary, right? So it's relatively easy to move most of that infrastructure over to the Linux Foundation without moving the actual content itself over. The content itself is like $100,000 a month S3 bucket for build packs. It's very expensive and large. And I don't think the Linux Foundation is going to want to pay $1.2 million for build pack dependencies. I'm not sure. We're thrilled to pay $1.2 million or whatever it is for. I'm not sure if that figure is exactly right, but it's high enough where I'm like, we're in trouble. There's this huge collection of assets, right? Not to mention, like, how would you move such a large bucket physically, even out of one account, from one account to another? This is not Azure. You can't just change the subscription associated with the thing and then be done. And then the biller is changed and you're just done. This is like, I have to move all those assets physically, right? And there's like version buckets. I don't think you can move some of this stuff. And unfortunately, the Amazon account that VMware hosts this in is the old Pivotal Web Services account, and it has a ton of different diverse things in it. And we can't move that account to the Linux Foundation trivially either. So anyway, long story short, there's a large S3 bucket. I don't think we can move that at this time, but like we can move all the other stuff to the Linux Foundation to make it easier to renew and monitor those certificates in-house. Like this is a function that Chris and the LF should be doing. And like when we moved DNS over from VMware to the Linux Foundation, we then lost the ability to trivially do some of this stuff ourselves, which is fine. But we need to follow through on moving some of the other assets so that that's all self-service. And then when there's an escalation, we can just ping Chris and he'll be on vacation and it will be resolved 9 days later. And in the meantime, no one will be able to push apps. So maybe we need to think about escalation paths too for how we deal with a IT outage at the Linux Foundation. And maybe we in the TOC can be involved in that. Like, I don't know how easy it is for us to be backup administrators for anything, and how much Chris wants to make that his job. Or Ram, I don't know whether you can do any of that stuff, but it seems like having one person at LF that we could escalate to could be problematic in this one circumstance going forward, right? Like I essentially was about to need a DNS change and to make this work, and I was like, if I can't get a hold of Chris, we're done, right? I don't have a path to escalate here. Yeah, we got lucky because I found an old certificate that worked. There's a wildcard.
I'm very curious about where you found that certificate.
Well, we had a wildcard cert that was still valid, and then we had a non-wildcard cert for build packs that had expired. So I just swapped the cert on the CloudFront distribution to a different cert that also still works for now, until that expires. Right?
It's like actually to the one of the first things you said. I don't know if that bucket needs to be that large, or is like maybe lots of those things could be deleted. But actually, no matter what and no matter how expensive, this should be a thing that is accounted for in the CFF, TOC, whatever budget we have for also running concourses and other things, instead of having this on the bill of VMware, actually, right?
Yeah, and maybe we can use, we could use CloudFront to maybe help us solve this problem, and that we could cut over to a new thing going forward, right? We could be like, hey, there's a new bucket, and then we're going to give the old one so long. Like this is the problem. Yeah, it's just like stem cells, right? It's like, when is a specific AMI associated with a very old stem cell version eligible for garbage collection? Exactly, right? Tell me when you're sure that no one's going to boot it, right?
I imagine there are many other S3 buckets for Bosch releases and Bosch release packages and these kind of things, where nobody knows exactly how many of those assets are still required. And like, while they piled up, nobody cared, because I mean, yeah, pushing some megabytes to bucket isn't that expensive, right? But it piles up.
Yeah, the Bosch ones are less important. I think I think like there's ones that are actually runtime dependencies of the world, and there aren't very many of them. It's like stem cell AMI need to still exist, or the stem cell won't be bootable, right? The Google all the light stem cells are problematic, and these build pack dependencies are problematic. I think maybe in my mind, step one isn't to like come up with a way to do all of this. It's like, let's identify which one of these dependencies are actually critical runtime dependencies of people in the world. And then let's figure out how to secure those under the Linux Foundation. And you're right, I don't know if it's an expensive large bucket. I think we can do a cutover plan where new stuff ends up in there. And the real problem is we have no garbage collection strategy on that bucket. But I don't, that's a policy decision that we can make here, which is like, you can only get dependencies up to 1 year, like something like that, right? We need to write down a policy which says like, after a year, if you try to use an old build pack that points at an old thing, I don't know, we could work with the build packs folks to figure out what's a reasonable policy and is that actually executable? But you could see how you fail, right? Because you can never know for sure when something isn't being used. You just have to make a decision, right?
Yeah.
David, you mentioned the cost for that S3 bucket. Is that just for the storage of those? Is that also for transfer, like the amount of traffic that's serving?
I'm guessing too there. I need to get the exact number. We know one of them was large for a different bucket, right? And I'm extrapolating this one's even larger. I'll get you the exact number, but it's big enough that there was a problem with trying to transfer it last time. And I think maybe transferring it isn't the right strategy anyway. It's like deprecate and move on. But then if we can't figure out a way to do this correctly the next time, then we're just going to end up with a huge bucket again, right? Okay, so I'm going to have Greg, who's the lead of that area, work with Chris on the build packs one. I guess I'll take point in generating a list of ones that are like that and run it by you all. Like we need our collective memory to go figure out what might be runtime dependencies. I didn't know this build packs domain name existed or what it did until Sunday night. So like, I don't know how many more of those there are where applications like this, the platform as a whole doesn't work. I can't imagine there are too many. I'm hoping it's just the two we came up with, but like, let's do a brainstorming exercise collectively to figure out what else might be in that category. So we can just decide how to move, if possible, those things over to minimize any disruption to anybody going forward.
Yeah, makes sense. Are there any action items we want to record coming out of this? I also added one for us collectively to take a look at that PR planning sheet that Ron mentioned. Should we just collectively raise this with Chris when he's back next week about how we can do some of that consolidation of the fronting assets and DNS management, and maybe start a working agreement about the TOC could be an IT backup for some of these?
Agreed. Are we done for the day?
I think we are, unless there's any other topics.
Eric, do you have time this week to talk?
Yeah, I do.